Remember the tipping point? 25 years ago, Malcolm Gladwell wrote this super hopeful book for a pretty hopeful time. It was all about how small changes could create these massive positive epidemics. But, well, the world's a little different now. And so Gladwell is back, taking a second look at his most famous idea, but this time he's looking at its dark side. Let's dive into how he basically flips his own script and what that tells us about the world we're living in today. And this quote? This is really the heart of the whole thing. A quarter century later, Gladwell isn't just curious about how cool trends catch on. No, he's putting on his detective hat and doing what he calls a forensic investigation into how social epidemics are actually deliberately engineered. And that brings us to this key concept, social engineering. Yeah, this isn't about the charming accidental way a fashion trend spreads. This is about people who know the rules of contagion and use them to get exactly what they want. You can use these tools for good, like a brilliantly designed public health campaign that saves millions of lives, or you can use them for a disinformation campaign that rips a country apart. Same tools, totally different, and sometimes devastating results. Okay, so to get us there, Gladwell doesn't start with the answers. Instead, he starts with these really strange, real-world puzzles, things that just don't seem to make any sense at all. He takes us to this place he calls Poplar Grove. And on the surface, it's picture perfect. A wealthy, high-achieving town where the kids are smart, successful, they seem to have everything. But for some reason, this town was hit with a tragic suicide epidemic. It's a total mystery. What invisible force is at work in a place that seems to have it all figured out? And then there's this other puzzle from a physician named John Wenberg. And this is where it gets really weird. He found that in one town in Vermont, 70% of kids had their tonsils removed by the time they were 15. But in the town literally right next door, it was only 20%. I mean, come on, same kids, same state, same tonsils. What is going on here? Turns out these puzzles aren't as random as they look. Gladwell says they follow a hidden set of rules, and he gives us a new toolkit, some forensic tools, to see how these social contagions are really ignited and, more importantly, controlled. Okay, tool number 1 is what he calls the Overstory. The best way to think about it is like the canopy of a huge forest. It's this powerful, invisible story that hangs over a whole community. It's their shared values, their assumptions, their gut feelings about how the world works. It affects everything happening down on the ground, but most of the time, nobody even realizes it's there. Now for tool number 2. If you read the first book, you'll remember the law of the few. Well, Gladwell is basically saying, scratch that. I was wrong. It's way more extreme. He now calls it the law of the very, very, very few. He shows that in almost any system you look at, a tiny, almost invisible handful of people, the superspreaders, are doing nearly all the work. We're not talking 80-20 here. It's more like 99. So we've got our tools, the Overstory and the Superspreaders. Now let's use them to perform an autopsy on one of the most devastating engineered epidemics of our lifetime, the American Opioid Crisis. This quote from someone inside Purdue Pharma, it just says everything, doesn't it? This wasn't just about launching another pill. This was an incredibly ambitious, calculated plan to completely change the practice of medicine. And the result? Well, you're looking at it. This graph is absolutely terrifying. It shows that the opioid crisis isn't some global phenomenon. No, it's a uniquely, fundamentally American catastrophe. No other high-income country on Earth has a chart that looks remotely like this. This didn't just happen. Gladwell argues it was designed. So how did they do it? How did they pull this off? Gladwell breaks their strategy down into 3 key moves. A perfect storm of social engineering. Let's walk through them. First, they attacked the Overstory. For decades, a lot of doctors had this deeply ingrained culture of being extremely careful about prescribing strong narcotics. Purdue's marketing machine went to war with that story. They pushed a new one. That pain wasn't just a symptom. It was a vital sign that had to be stamped out aggressively, preferably with their powerful new drug. Second, they went straight for the superspreaders. With a little help from the consultants at McKinsey, Purdue didn't waste its time trying to convince every doctor. Nope. They turbocharged their sales by identifying and targeting the tiny sliver of doctors who were already writing the most prescriptions. They focused all their energy on that small but incredibly influential group. And that brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. And honestly, this is the most shocking part of the whole story. In 2010, Purdue released a new abuse-proof version of OxyContin. The idea was to make it safer. But this single, seemingly well-intentioned change, It's what turned a crisis into an absolute catastrophe. This chart shows you exactly what happened. The solid line is reality. It's the overdose deaths after that safer pill was introduced. See how it skyrockets? That's because people who were dependent on the old pill couldn't use the new one. So they switched to the black market, to heroin, and then fentanyl. Now look at that dotted line. That's what researchers think would have happened without the change. The crisis might have actually started to burn itself out. Instead, the solution was like pouring gasoline on the fire, which brings us right back to a moment from the beginning of the book. A member of the Sackler family, the family that owns Purdue, said these exact words to Congress. Gladwell points out that this is the passive voice. It's the sound of someone refusing to take responsibility for something that was actively and intentionally engineered. It wasn't just associated with abuse. It was marketed in a way that created it. And so that leaves us with a pretty unsettling final thought. These tools that Gladwell lays out, changing the overstory, targeting superspreaders, shifting how groups behave, they aren't just historical curiosities. They are absolutely being used right now. You can see them in marketing, in politics, in the culture wars that are all around us. But now the curtain's been pulled back a little. We can start to see how the trick is done. The real question is, what are we going to do now that we know?